Well, hi, my name's Gary Kerr and I'm a silviculturalist, and I spent most of my career working for the Forestry Commission. Silviculture is really the art and science of tending woodlands so that you can achieve your objectives, and it includes very basic things like regeneration and planting and thinning and felling trees so that you can change the structure and species composition of your woodland to achieve what you want to achieve. For instance, where we're filming now, this is an ancient semi-natural woodland, and these are valuable habitats environmentally, and there are various constraints and there are various advantages for different ways of managing this type of woodland, and it's really important that you take account of the options that are available to you. There are four main ways of managing a woodland. The first is to do nothing as an informed process. The second is to thin it. That's removing some of the trees and selling them as timber. And the third is to fell trees, whether in small groups or in larger areas as clear felling. And the fourth method is through coppicing, which is cutting trees and allowing the stumps to regrow as quite small shoots. So what we've got behind us is an established plantation of Coppicing pine, and what we need to do is to think about the four options that we've got for managing that woodland, and clearly the best thing to do is to thin it because it's established, we don't need to coppice it, just doing nothing really isn't an option, and it's not yet big enough to start thinking about felling and regeneration. So thinning basically is a process of removing, let's say, about 20% of the volume for a stand like this, probably every 5 or 6 years. And that can be really useful because it can produce really quite a lot of money. But of course, in order to cut down and bring out the material, it does mean a lot of use of quite big machines. That can mean disturbance in the woodland. It can also mean, if it's very, very wet, some soil disturbance as well. And of course, there has to be good access both into the woodland and for the produce to get from the site where it's being cut out onto the road network. But anyway, it's a clear example here of thinning and the benefits that thinning can bring to developing your woodland, because if you continue thinning your woodland, you may have other options such as the use of continuous cover. So when you're dealing with this sort of uniform woodland, thinning always has to be one of the main things that you have to think about in terms of management. Okay, so here we are. This is a clear fell, as you can see. All of the mature trees have been taken down all at one time, and then very quickly afterwards some young trees have been planted, and we'll describe that a little bit more in a few moments, but it might first be worth thinking a little bit about why we would want to use clear felling in terms of the objectives that we want to achieve. A big objective is timber production. Clear felling and even age forestry is a very good way of producing timber for the market and producing quite large quantities of it so that it's an economic proposition. But there are other objectives, things like nightjars and woodlarks, which are important woodland birds, actually do like this type of habitat for nesting. So conservation objectives can be served by clear felling. And as you can see from the beautiful view behind us, sometimes landscape objectives are also very important. Clear felling, basically in summary, it's the complete removal of a tree crop. It's usually only ever applied to conifer dominated stands, and it has to be used very, very carefully and planned for in the landscape context. However, if you get to the state that we're in now, that we've got quite nicely established young trees, you can see basically behind us, we've actually got what we should be trying to aim for, which is, after very good care and maintenance, we have got established trees which are probably something like 10 to 15 years old. The canopy has closed, and also rather nicely there is a mixture of species. There's Douglas fir, there's pines, and there's also birches, and the birches can be an important component of conferring much greater resilience in the plantation. So really what we want to do in our early years is achieve this sort of good quality establishment in our felling operations to try and achieve what we can see behind us, which is a mixed species plantation that is well established. Okay, so we've considered clear felling, and it's quite useful, I think, to have a bit of a reality check about clear felling, because in order to bring about, first of all, the removal of the large trees from the site, and also to carry out planting and maintenance operations to achieve the newly established woodland, we really do need to have good access to the site with good infrastructure in terms of the roading, and the owner needs to be aware of the fact that there's quite a lot of large machines may actually be used in both the felling and the replanting of the new woodland. So do bear that in mind, it's a really important point. The second reality check about clear felling is that you, of course, by removing some very, very large, well-established trees on a site, you do make very large changes to the environment that you're managing. The ones above ground are really very easy. You're basically taking away a canopy of trees, and in response to that, the vegetation response that you can get can actually be very, very vigorous and can cause problems for forest management. And on some heavier soils, you can get a really very large uplift in the water table of the area, and that can bring in species like juncus and calamagrostis, which can make establishing the new woodland really, really very difficult. So here we've got something called coppice, but before we talk about coppice, we want to talk about the species that's being coppiced. This is sweet chestnut coppice. It's really quite common in southeast England, and it's a beautifully adapted tree for climate change, so it may become more and more common throughout Britain as climate change progresses. What happens with a coppice is that you have a very large tree stump, and you can see that all these stems here are basically on one tree stump. And the tree stump has been felled, and then the tree stump has produced quite small sprouts, a lot of them, and then they've probably either naturally become a much smaller number, or there may have been a process called singling, where you actually remove some of the shoots just so that there's about 5 to 10 stems on each stump. But it doesn't just happen with sweet chestnut. You coppice with most broadleaf species that are commonly grown in Britain. The one exception is beech, which doesn't show such a favourable response to coppice. Sweet chestnut coppice, or coppice generally, is grown on rotations of 7 to 25 years, depending on what you're doing with the product. In this case, it's a 20-year rotation for sweet chestnut, and this will be probably going for fuel wood or for post and rail fences and gate posts and things like that. So as well as timber production, it's worth considering the objectives of management that you can achieve through using coppice. Obviously you get an element of timber production, but what you also get, if you have an area concentrated on coppice, you can use different coppice cycles so that you have open areas within your forest in a regulated and organised way. And that's particularly useful for things like butterflies and moths, to have those variety of different habitats dotted around the forest. So coppice, it's a really nice simple system. The only disadvantage is that once you've made the cut, if you've got lots and lots of deer, then they will come and nibble the sprouts, and you need to control the deer. But it's a nice simple system, and it can achieve a lot of different objectives of management. In summary then, if you own a woodland and you're looking to manage it, the most important thing that you can do is understand why you are managing the woodland, what you are trying to achieve. If you don't know the answer to that question, our advice is to seek professional help from a forester. There are 4 main options for managing your woodland. The first one is not really to do very much, but of course that has to be an informed opinion. It can't just be neglect. The second thing that you can do is to thin the woodland, which means removing some of the produce, making a bit of money, and altering the composition and structure of the woodland. The third thing that you can do is some felling, and that also means some sort of regeneration, and the scale of that felling can be small or quite large. The last option is coppicing, and we've seen how some of the trees that we have, native broadleaf trees, can actually be coppiced and cut at the stump and then regrow, and that can be a really useful method of managing woodland. So we've got our 4 options for management, but our main take-home message is that if you own and manage your woodland, the key thing to do is to seek professional advice from a forester.